Hi, everybody. It's 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock here Central, and we're about ready to start the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership's special presentation on how to get a good, polite mob to the Capitol. Emphasis on the word polite. I do like to differentiate ourselves between us and the anti-Trump Trump demonstrators that are going to wherever in the heck they're going. And damaging property, etc. And that is not a very good conservative way of living life. If somebody could just let me know that they can see my screen and hear me just by typing in yes or, in the inbox. Yep, got some people, so okay, good. Folks can hear me, so that's always a good start. We're going to talk about organizing principles as far as putting pressure on legislators, but all culminating toward getting a large crowd over at the Capitol. So let's start off about some basic principles of getting other people involved, and how do we get folks to actually take action. That's our goal, and that's what we're going to be working on. Now, just a reminder of what you've been taught during your one-day school. When we're working inside the Capitol, that is where leadership and the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, all the political class, that's where they have power. I mean, they can actually do damage to you. They can hold up your bills. They can take money away from your champion's district, et cetera, and they can put pressure on things inside the Capitol. But we're talking about outside operations. This is where we put pressure on the legislature. This is where we create the political environment that we want, where, politicians have to pay attention to us. So, and I think it's the much more fun place to be. I don't like working in the Capitol because that's where you can really get into that subtle version of the education trap, where you're trying to persuade legislators by your eloquence or by logic, and that just doesn't work on controversial bills. The big thing is always numbers and putting pressure on them. And it's the art of confrontation. And whoever does it better wins. So first thing you want to determine is, do you really want a public fight? I mean, I'm assuming, you do want this policy. You either want to pass or defeat a bill. But do you want it to be a public fight or not? And the way you determine that is by using one of our tools, which would be the Red Fox 4. Which is going to help you determine, is it going to help build up membership? Is it going to help our friends? Is it going to hurt our enemies? Those are the first three criteria. Win or lose, just by getting into the fight, will it create a positive political environment? And we rank those from a -10 to a +10. So, that's what we're looking at. I'm assuming that, we want the policy, that's a positive. And that, this is a fight that's going to be, we want to be public, because that's going to help us in the first three criteria. But there's a danger inherent with the Red Fox 4 tool, and that is you're not going to use it. You're not going to figure out if this is really a fight that you want to fight publicly or kind of behind the scenes. But we're going to assume that, okay, we've done our Red Fox 4. This is a fight that we want a big, bloody, public fight on, because it's going to help us get new members, help our friends, hurt our enemies. So let's start talking about how do we actually make that happen. Well, let me remind you about things that, there are things that are pleasurable to politicians, which are real tangible things that tend to lead to their reelection. But the big thing, the most important thing when you're trying to change a politician's behavior is actually pain. And the nice thing about political pain is that it's ongoing. You can keep it, you can sustain it for a very long time. And when I'm defining political pain, I'm talking about real, tangible things which might lead to a politician's political death, which means they don't get reelected. See, to a politician, pleasure is life. Re-election is life. They get to stay in the Capitol and they keep getting able to do things. Death is when they lose their seat. So painful things are real, tangible things that might lead to their defeat. Things like bad press. Now, a bad story isn't going to kill you, but enough of it will. Enough public embarrassments can certainly end your political career. Being ignored, either by your colleagues, the press, etc., can certainly be painful. Might end up, having people forget who you are come election time. Instead of endorsements being denounced by different organizations, start adding that up, and it could hurt you. Certainly challengers. I mean, you can't defeat somebody with nobody. So, having challengers, particularly in primaries, can be particularly painful because it could lead to their political death. The volunteers, which means you have to spend your political money to do things that you would normally have volunteers do. That's painful. And then lack of money. I mean, if you don't have volunteers and you don't have money, it's darn difficult to mount a successful campaign. And, there are things these are all things that you can do that, you can help draft their money and stuff like that, and they all get the politicians' attention. These do cause pain and make the politician think they might lose their seat. But the biggest source of pain to a politician, the one that keeps them up at night and wondering, what is happening and what do they need to do, is demonstrable proof of large numbers of angry voters. When they start seeing that signs that, my gosh, there are a bunch of people and they are really mad about this issue, and I better change my political behavior, or I better be on the right side of this issue, that gets their attention. And they realize that when they vote against a large mob of people that are very angry, that might lead to their political death. Sometimes they're willing to take that chance. For instance, the Democrats with Obamacare. They took the chance that they were, that they might lose their seat, but they were doing it for long-term political gain. But it was still painful. It wasn't an easy thing for them to do. So that demonstrable proof of large number of angry voters is the crucial thing. So when you have public fights, remember that, what we do on the inside, working with our inside leaders and champions to set up a roll call vote, all that work is just to be able to get the grassroots involved. Now, some principles to remember in any type of big political fight where you're trying to get the grassroots involved is, number one, politics is not an ideas game. Politics is a numbers game. That's, you got to realize that, when politicians, they may have run on a particular issue saying, I'm going to support this, but at the end of the day, when they get 2 letters from, constituents supporting them and thousands of it opposing it, they're going to say, well, look, maybe I took the wrong position, during the campaign. I need to be voting with the people of my district, and they're going to vote with the numbers. And that's not always necessarily political cowardice on their part. I mean, their job is to be popular and do the will of their constituents. That, and how we on the outside do our job as far as proving that their constituents really do want them to take this action is the crucial thing. So remember always, that this is numbers game. We want volume. So we've decided that, hey, it is time. Let's back up here. It is time to call out the troops, and we want to put pressure on these guys. So anyway, remember that when we're putting pressure on them, every voter counts the same, and we want to utilize human nature to be what it is, and realize that, look, when something's easy to do, people tend to do it. But if you make it difficult, it goes in the stack. That's the part of your desk that, when you send somebody an email saying, hey, can you send your congressman a letter? Okay, I need to do that. And you put it in the corner of your desk, and every time you get some free time, you pick it up and you kind of, I kind of need to do that. And it just kind of stays on that part of your desk. until, eventually the issue goes away. So if you ask your members to do stuff that's really difficult, that's going to be time consuming, that's going to get them way out of their comfort zone, you're going to end up in the hunt stack. So let's try to avoid that by making things very easy to do so people are more apt to do it. Because when we do that, that's how we get volume. That's how we're going to get numbers to do it. Which means, really that we shouldn't complicate this. We need to break things down into simple mechanical steps. If you notice, a lot of our emails that come from Campaign for Liberty or from National Association for Gun Rights and other groups I'm affiliated with, you're going to see, hey, can you take the following steps? 1, send the enclosed postcard. 2, call your legislator. 3, send in a contribution. Just 1, 2, 3. It's very simple for folks to follow the steps. So that's what you want to do. You want to make it simple. Don't make it complicated. So you get the idea that every voter counts the same, that this is a numbers game, and we want to put pressure on them. Our formula for success ultimately comes down to under-promising and over-delivering. One of the mistakes I've seen people make is they think that they can bluff politicians by saying, hey, if you vote against this, or, if you don't take action, we're going to get thousands of people over here. Now, look, you may develop a group of 500 people that show up at the Capitol, and that can be quite a feat, depending on what state you're in. But you promised 1,000. Now there's only 500. So they're going to be less apt to be scared of you because you overpromised and underdelivered. So whenever you tell them, look, I've got people in your district that might be upset if you don't take action on this, well, how many? Well, at least 10, maybe 20. If they get 10 or 20 postcards or letters or calls from folks, that's probably maybe about right. That there's folks in their district that's taking action. If you promise them that, look, I think I can get 20 people to call you and 50 do, now all of a sudden they're going to be very nervous because, you under-promised, over-delivered. Now they're going to really start wondering exactly how many folks you can reach out to. So keep that principle in mind. You don't get extra points by bragging, thumping your chest, and bluffing. Now, how's the best way of putting pressure on legislators? How do you demonstrate that there's large numbers of angry voters? Well, the first easy way is this. The principle is simple. You always want to be building your lists. So, that allows you to reach out to folks and get postcards, which are great because they're cheap, they're easy, and they're volume. It's very simple for a member to sign a postcard and send it to their legislator or give it to you to give to their legislator. It's almost like a petition at some level. So that's a great way of creating volume. And what I'm going to be suggesting to you is that as you go through these different things, like, with your postcards and petitions, etc., these are things that you can help build your list. And when you identify somebody who's willing to sign a postcard or willing to sign a petition, either online or in person, a paper one, that switches them from being somebody who is a supporter to now an activist. And every time somebody takes a step and goes from being just an identified supporter to becoming an activist, they go into your list, and I want their phone numbers because, when we start wanting to get people to show up at the Capitol, now we have activists who care about the issue enough to take some action. Then you're going to try to take them to the next step, which is to get them to the Capitol. The people that I'm calling to try to get to the Capitol down the road are activists who've actually taken some sort of action. So they're taking the minimum steps right now, and they're helpful steps. Postcards show that people care. Petitions, even online petitions, are demonstrable proof that there are angry voters in their district who care about the issue, who are willing to take some sort of action. So that's the next one. After that are letters. And believe it or not, you can generate letters if you give them a postcard or a petition, where you say, can you send this postcard into the legislator, or better yet, a personal letter. And people will take your postcard and just basically copy it verbatim, and they send in the letter, and they oftentimes have somebody send in the postcard too. So that creates kind of a twofer. So these are all things that are, again, going to generate pressure, but remember what's required of all these is you've got a plan. It takes time to get postcards printed and out, and then get them back. As you get closer and you've identified people that are willing to take, basic steps like sending a postcard, then you contact those activists and ask them, can you call your legislator? Some people get really uptight and nervous about calling their congressman and their legislator to ask them to support a bill or oppose a bill. I don't know why, but it's intimidating to some folks. It takes some folks out of their comfort zone. But, of your activists that you've identified that have taken some action, they'll go a step further and they'll make phone calls. Then, many of them will send emails to their legislators. If they won't make a phone call, at least have them send an email to them. Faxes, they're still out there. And the cool thing about faxes is politicians, will actually use government resources to actually print them for some dang reason instead of treat them like emails. But they do oftentimes print them. And then, one of the things I'd like to do, just to put a human face on things occasionally, is to get face-to-face meetings with, a couple of key constituents, just to put a human face on it, so that, they don't think that you're over by yourself, sitting in a basement, printing postcards and sending them to them. When they actually see some folks from the district that care about the issue, suddenly they have to take it a lot more seriously, and it creates pain. Now, don't send the nice people to go meet with them. I mean, when you're going to, when you're doing the face-to-face meetings, send people with kind of an attitude that are willing to get in their face. They'll say, hey, what are you doing? And I'm willing to help lead a charge against you come election time if you vote bad on this issue. So, these are all things that you can do with your members, and as you identify some of your best activists, to keep the pressure on them. And you have to plan for each phase. And if you're doing it right, it's going to keep building, and you're going to keep growing your list each time. And, you can ask people, who sent in the petition or their postcard, hey, do you know any like-minded folks that might also want to do it? And, hopefully you'll be able to get that information so that you can keep building up the list and see who will be taking little baby step actions. So you've hopefully by the first part of your fight, you've actually developed a list of activists. And now we're going to try to mobilize them a little bit further, because sometimes you need a polite mob to show up. So you've got folks that are willing to do at least 2 postcards, etc. Now we want them to do more. So we're going to talk about getting the crowd together. One way, let me suggest that you kind of pay attention to, if you're ever go to the state fair, or, you're at any type of public event where there's street vendors and things like that. Watch how these guys actually build up a crowd, to watch them demonstrate cooking products and things like that. I mean, this is a really good indication on how to do direct grassroots action. Occasionally, you don't always have time, when you want to create an event to get your activist over there, things happen too quickly. One of the more fun projects that we did many years ago, I said this is some fellow activists that were working in the state of Alabama. There was a shooting down of a plane, KLA-007, that was flying and was shot down by the Soviet Union back, the old Cold War days. And a member of Congress was on that flight. It was going to South Korea, and got a lot of people really upset. So we decided to do a demonstration, and we're out in the front of the, we decided to burn a Soviet flag, to protest. We didn't have time to, it was before the internet, didn't have time to, assemble a mob. So we got a ready-made mob. We did the thing, had the press conference that we're going to be holding the event at noon on a weekday, and we're going to do it at the steps at the state office complex, where we had a ready-made crowd, where people are going to be coming down the steps anyway for lunchtime, so there's already going to be people thronging around us. And then we, created through crowd, basically a celebrity type thing. We created an event that got people's attention, and people gathered around it and spent part of their lunch hour with us, cheering while we were burning the Soviet flag, and actually got national news coverage. When I was running a campaign for labor commissioner in Oklahoma, the incumbent Democrat had been ignoring a serious asbestos issue in a public building where there's a lot of state employees. So we did kind of the same thing. We decided that we were going to have a press conference, and in order to get people's attention at that event, we had everything set up for the press conference. We waited until everybody was coming out for lunch, invited the press, and we had a bunch of guys running around in hazmat suits during the day, passing out flyers talking about, everybody knows that, asbestos is a problem except for the incumbent. And, your building that may be contaminated. And look, you got guys running around in hazmat suits passing out stuff in front of a government building. People have a tendency to stop and pay attention. So, you can use some sort of attention-catching thing, or celebrities. Look, not every celebrity has to be a Donald Trump. There are some celebrities that people, high school, college football people, coaches might be a local celebrity, small town, and you're doing something at city council, a local firefighter, police officer, something like that, elected official might be a celebrity. So, that type of thing may help get attention. But, the other thing that works is sparkly stuff. The guys running around in the hazmat suits, the communist flag burning, etc. Things that get people's attention. This is how you build up a crowd to gather around you. Just basically want to get their attention. And then if you watch the guys at the fair and they're doing the product demonstration at a public event, what they do is they box them in. They'll actually sometimes have people standing around, leaning in, toward the back of the room to kind of get the rest of the crowd, in a position where they don't feel like they can leave and they want to watch the demonstration to the very end. So you create, you box in your herd, and you try to hold your herd as long as possible so people can actually take action. If you really want to know the best at this, try to find P.T. Barnum's autobiography. I think it's even available online now. This guy could build crowds better than anybody else. Yeah, he always was known for saying there was a sucker born every minute type thing, but, he knew how to attract crowds and get people to actually pay attention to stuff and that he wanted to, and actually managed to get them to give money to him, which is a pretty good skill. And then again, watch the product demonstration people about how they, attract attention, keep their herd together, and so, people actually sit through a product demonstration that they really weren't planning on doing. These are all things that, are learnable skills and can be useful politically. Now, that is a way of getting a crowd to show that, there's angry voters. Another way is to use the politicians' own events. If they're doing a town hall meeting or something like that, and there's a big thing going on, that's an easy way to get a crowd because they are celebrities, and people will show up automatically just because of their credibility. So if they're doing a public meeting, take it over. First thing I want to do is, okay, where and when is it going to be? And then recruit some activists to show up to start doing flyer drops in front to start getting the crowd ginned up. And then you want to take over the event. And the easiest way to take over any event is by having at least 4 activists in 4 strategic locations. And we call this the diamond formation. You see, if the people, the person up in front, side, and in the back, if they all start applauding, the whole crowd will start applauding. Or if they start booing and they stand up and start yelling, the rest of the crowd will. And it's an amazing thing to watch. But we're so conditioned, that when we're in a group environment, we're kind of tensed up anyway. We start reacting the way other people are reacting, and it may take us a while to think about, why am I applauding? We may not realize it initially, but the rest of the crowd is. I mean, think about it at movies, when all of a sudden people start applauding the movie screen because the Death Star gets blown up. I mean, it's a movie. Who cares? But, we just start doing that stuff as far as crowds are concerned. So, critical. If you want to control, a political meeting, make sure you hold those 4 spots. Conversely, make sure your political enemies don't hold those 4 spots. They're both important. So, if you do that, you're going to control the meeting, and you can create that pain for them. If a politician isn't holding an event, issues too controversial or whatever, and they're just not doing public appearances, another easier way of getting a crowd together is to use somebody else's event. If somebody else is going to be holding an event, bless their hearts, your life has just been made a lot easier because now you get basically a free ride on their event, and they may have a bigger list than you. So take advantage of, what they're doing. Somebody else is getting a crowd together, join in. Invite your members to join in and have them join you. Your best activists need to join you in list harvesting. Going through the crowd and getting their names and information. I mean, the idea is to find out who's there. And look, one of these questions I've asked myself many times is, if there was a big event, if there was a rally, and nobody has a list of who showed up, did the event really take place? And that's kind of a question mark to me, because it's actually, to me, it's not just so much a question mark, it is a black cloud over the event, because, dang it, that was a wasted opportunity. People took time out of their day, out of their lives, some of them paid for babysitters, etc., to come over and take part in this event, and nobody gave them the opportunity to sign up on a sheet so that they could stay in touch with you and find out what happened to the bill. They went over there, they took their time. Now, let's give them the tools to stay in touch, to actually be able to follow this thing along and stay involved in the fight. Now, you want to get them to sign a petition or, put their names on the list. And I'm going to show you how to do it right. But most Tea Party rallies, they just want to have a big outdoor event, giving people, their guys a chance, microphone, and to sound off in front of a bunch of people. But nobody's there collecting names of who showed up, which is a waste. So recruit folks to go out in the crowd to actually sign petitions, make them interesting. The National Rifle Association was fighting a bill in Maryland. And, they had this big rally. And all these folks were showing up. And nobody from the NRA thought that it would be a really good idea to actually find out who showed up. So we had some friends of ours from the National Association for Gun Rights show up with their hats, and they created what they called assault clipboards, which were basically clipboards. They painted them black, and they put a dowel on them, because they knew that in order to get into the Capitol, you had to stand in line over the security thing, and it was a small area, and everybody was going to be standing in line bored to death, waiting to get in there. So these guys went down the rows with these assault clipboards, asking people to sign a petition so that they could, oppose the bill that they were at the rally with anyway. Harvested the information, the critical stuff that I'll go over later, And, and it worked extremely well. So, they utilized somebody else's events to get more names for their organization, which is a great use of time. Now, with petitions, remember always, paper is cheap, especially when you consider the cost of your time and the other people's time. However, an email address with one bad or unclear letter in it is worth 0, because if you guess wrong when you put it in there, it bounces back, and you cannot send a bad email. So one way of making sure that doesn't happen is to use this type of block, that make it where people have to put one letter in each block, and that helps their penmanship dramatically, particularly with email addresses. And there's certain information we want to get from them. We want their name. I mean, that's the most important thing to everybody. It's the most important thing that people will always listen for is their own name. So we want that. We want their zip code. I really don't care about the city. I can figure out the city from the zip code. But in Oklahoma City, there's 25 House and Senate districts. There's 3 congressional districts that border it here. And if I say, ask them what city they're in, it could be any of those districts. But with the zip code, I know what legislative district they're in. Congressional, House, state, whatever. And their email address or potentially their phone number. Either one or both are fine with me. As long as there's an inexpensive way for me to be able to get in touch with them later on down the line, I'm happy. So, but really what we're negotiating for, when we're asking them to sign a petition is we're trying to get their phone number or email address more than anything else. With their email address, let them know that, hey, if you give me your email address, I'll let you know how your legislator voted on this particular issue. So that's always, good thing. And the best way to do a petition is one person, does one signature on it and not multiples. I mean, this is a bad example. When you create a petition where, multiple people can sign on a sheet of paper, it doesn't create volume. I mean, I want, to show up at the Capitol with, 150, 500 sheets of paper, all showing that all these people are mad, and it makes a nice, decent stack on a legislator's desk in and of itself. Don't print them all off of one page of everybody that opposes it, because who cares about an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper? But, big stack of 500 to 1,000 petitions actually looks kind of nice. So don't do it like this. Look, when you make it small blocks like this, handwriting gets all crammed together and, doesn't come across real clear. I mean, this is a better version. We've got something that's, important. It looks official. You've got the sign part. I chop it off at the sign part. The politician gets the sign part. My version, the part that I care about is their name and zip code and email address and phone number. So I get the part that I find most important. Politician gets demonstrable proof of large number of angry voters. And I've got a bunch of activists, that they're willing to at least sign a petition. Maybe they're willing to do other stuff. So this is a better version of being able to do, petition process. Now, you've got this, you've been fighting this battle for a while. You've been doing all these emails, et cetera, and you've created a pretty darn good list of activists. Now, are they just going to show up at the Capitol because you ask them to show up? Probably not. It's going to require some work, probably a lot of work. So, when you're trying to do a mass event and you're trying to get people to show up, just plan on it being a big use of your time. And it takes a lot of work to convince people. And think about, from, their perspective. And for me to go to a rally at the Capitol, I really have to almost designate 3+ hours. It takes me about 40 minutes to drive over to the Capitol. Then I got to find a parking place. Then I've got to sit at the rally, and then I've got to make my way back. And there's most days I really don't have 3 hours to sit around and do absolutely nothing. Or I've got many things that I can be doing, which do a lot more than just being another face in a crowd. So trying to convince me to spend 3 hours to attend their rally is not easy. Add to it back when I had kids, trying to get me and my wife to an event would have been really difficult because we would have had to have hired a babysitter. That's additional expenses plus the 3 hours, and gas, etc. So, keep in mind, it's not easy trying to convince folks to show up at your rallies. So if you're going to do your own event, you got to realize that in order to get people interested in this isn't just, okay, we're going to have a rally and we're going to send out an email and everybody will show up. No. You've got to use every media channel that you can get your hands on, to put pressure, to convince people that they should go. You have to get their attention and you got to convince them. So you're going to be doing a lot of selling on this thing. A friend of mine is a chiropractor, and in order for him to keep his doors open and to be able to practice as a chiropractor, he knows that he has to get 30 new customers a month. And people would ask him, well, how do you get 30 new customers a day? And what's the one thing you can do to get 30 new customers a month? And he would scratch his head and say, I don't know of one thing. But I know I do these 30 things, and I get 30 new customers. But I don't know which one is going to actually make a difference. But I just know I have to do these 30 things in order to get people to come. So be careful not to get hooked on, oh, yeah, we're going to rely on Facebook, or we're going to rely on our meetup, or we're going to rely on email. Think about what happened to people that back in the 80s and 90s that got really addicted to doing phone calls, to people to, get new business. That's how they got prospects. That's how they got people interested in their stuff. And what did the Congress do? They passed the do not call list. And anybody whose only way of attracting new customers was over the phone was out of business. Okay, well, there's another group of folks that were really into fax marketing. That's the way that they were going to get folks' attention. And Congress banned that. Well, what about emails? Well, they passed canned spam, trying to stop a lot of this stuff. It seems like every time there's a really good advertising marketing vehicle out there, Congress passes a law to take it away. They'll probably try to do something against Facebook if Facebook doesn't do it to them ahead of time. So, be aware of it, that do not get addicted to one. Try to use as many as you possibly can. So, look, things like Facebook, is a really nice way of reaching out to folks to get people to pay attention to your issue, to actually maybe take action. It's a first step and all that. But keep in mind, your message, your post, may only actually go out to 10% of your friends, maybe less, depending on what the volume is that particular day. So you can't rely on Facebook alone. However, you can pay to boost it. Now, keep in mind that costs money. Meetups, that were very popular with the Ron Paul people back in the 08-12 campaign, that's still around, and it can be a way of attracting people and getting them to join in. Go to like-minded meetings. Just like, you hijacked, somebody else's event, like the politician or like-minded group. You can also show up at their meetings, ask for permission to pass out flyers to tell people to come to your event, and they might, so worth your time if you're trying to get a crowd. Email, again, it's not, the optimal thing. Look, how many emails have you gotten so far in the last 40 minutes or so since you've been on this call? Probably 5 to 8. All of them saying, hey, the sky is falling, take action now. Okay, odds are, best of intention, you may see an email and you go, yeah, that sounds like a great thing to do, and you'll forget about it. So it takes lots of emails. But, it's a
part of your media channel. If you've got fax numbers, and you got a fax machine, yeah, good, crank that up. You might get some folks. Twitter, hashtag, whatever the heck your event's called, and try to get folks to attend. It's a way of creating buzz. You want to hit on everything that you possibly can. And you can do robocalls. If they're part of your, identified network, etc., just make sure that, you're following the local laws. Political stuff is not covered under the do not call list. However, there are sometimes states that require live operators, even on political stuff. The fines can be hefty. Oklahoma has a peculiar law that requires you to put a number at the end of it so people can at least call and complain and ask to be taken off your list, even though you're under no obligation to do it. But if you don't do it, it's a $1,000 fine per occurrence. Not for every time you do a robocall about it. We're talking about every call you made without that disclaimer. So that can be quite expensive if you ignore local laws. But robocalls, they're not going to create a crowd, but they're an advertising vehicle that make people aware of it, that helps get them on the radar screen, because of all the stuff that we get bombarded with every day, you need multiple hits to get their attention and make them realize that this is a real event. And repetition is the key to learning. So the more times you can help reinforce that message, and these are all nice, cheap, and easy. I mean, if you really, if you've got real serious resources and you've got actual physical addresses, I'd send out letters, flyers, and stuff like that to them. Actually, mail them to them, or drop them off, at the door, depending on your resources, to try to get the crowd over there. That's what you want to do. But the thing that really drives turnout at events are live calls. Nothing else comes close. Now, when you're hitting all these media channels, if your own numbers aren't complaining that you're emailing them too much, reminding them, if they're not complaining that they're getting too many phone calls, you're not doing it enough. Make sure that folks are complaining that you're calling them too much. If not, you haven't been doing it near enough. And you ought to be doing so many live calls, reminding people, asking them, making sure that they're going to honor their commitment to show up like they said they would. And you're helping them, be a good Christian, helping them make their yes be yes. They ought to show up in fear that, if I don't show up, I think they're going to keep calling. So that type of volume of phone calls. But, the way you're going to drive turnout more than anything else is somebody on the phone talking to them. And look, for anybody that, was born after 1980 something, who thinks it's impolite to call somebody without first texting them, call them. It isn't impolite. They have a phone for a reason. It's not just to check, Facebook, when they're at work. It actually is a communication vehicle. Just go ahead and call them. Now, be sure to use, flyers and posters. I don't know why we don't do that more often, but look, when you show up at a meeting and you're asking people to show up, for now, look, it's the same thing with like our foundation classes. One of the things that we include in, everybody that's organizing the school is an automatic flyer. They just have to push a button and they can print out as many flyers to help promote their event as possible. Gives all the relevant information. So make sure that you put out flyers. Make them visually interesting. They can be black and white. Color doesn't make any difference. Depends on what your budget is. But just make sure you actually tell folks, where they need to be, when they need to be there, what, or, if they need to bring anything, et cetera, what they're going to be doing, why the event's important. So all these types of things that you can do to get folks' attention. And the flyers actually, if Congress has their way, this may be our last best vehicle to get folks' attention. And look, if you've got a neighborhood that you've identified that may be a bunch of likely supporters of your particular issue, heck, flyer drop the entire neighborhood. Who cares? Get more people there. Now, trying to motivate people to action is difficult. You know, I think I'm pulling these numbers out of memory, but you think about the '60s, Vietnam War activism. How many folks actually participated in all that stuff? And I saw the numbers of this, and it absolutely blew my mind. Less than 3% of the country ever wrote their member of Congress about the Vietnam War, or called, and less than 0.1% of the population ever took part in a demonstration. And you think about these big groups of folks showing up at this stuff, but when you start breaking it down to what's the percentage of the population, and it's minuscule, but they're activists that are willing to get involved in a fight. I mean, you think about, how many women participated in the rally a couple of weeks ago. As a percentage of women in this country, it's pretty dang low. It's a small percentage of people, but it looks big when you put enough of them together. So, look, we're trying to motivate folks to take action. Only a small percentage actually will. Well, how do you sell this stuff? What do you do? Well, there's a formula that I want you to utilize. And, put it in all your communication with your members. It's a 4-part formula, and we use acrostic MICE to help you remember it. And the M in MICE stands for MAD, which means emotionally engaged. You can tell them all the facts you want, but until you explain to them why they should be upset about it, and until their emotions are engaged, they're not going to take any action. You have to get me passionate in order to do something. Why do you want to buy a particular model of car? Usually, that you can justify it with a certain number of facts, but usually it's because there's something emotional involved in it. Why do I want a Tesla? Well, I mean, I could try to say because it is an electric car, yada, yada, yada. But the bottom line is it looks cool. I really want it because it would be a cool car to have. That's pure emotion. So, emotional component's vital. The I stands for informed. Now, look, I am against education alone as a way of mobilizing people and getting them involved in fights. But if people are all upset about something, but they don't know what they're all upset about, that's a dangerous mob. You want people, education is a servant of mobilization. You can't mobilize folks without, at one level, telling them what they need to be upset about. So you do need to inform them about the importance of the issue and why they should give a rep. Basically, these are the facts. You have to sell them on that their involvement, their showing up at your event is actually going to make a difference. So you got to sell them on their participation in it. And the E stands for encouraged. That they have to be, at the end of the day, aware that they have spent their time well and that it is making a difference for the cause of liberty, freedom, whatever cause you happen to be fighting for. So if you're missing any of these elements, you're going to have a dysfunctional message. You need to make sure that people are mad, informed, sold on, the program, and encouraged that what they're doing is actually making a difference. And look, don't undersell encouragement. I mean, that basically, when you boil it down to it, is hope. And if you don't think there's a lot of money to be made in the hope business, take a look at the number of churches, because that's what those guys sell, basically, beyond, what is the truth, is hope. So hope is a very powerful thing. I mean, a little bit of hope can keep me going in a lot of tough fights. So use this formula in all your communications, on your Facebook posts, on your flyers, on all the things that you're asking people to, when you're asking, will you attend, make sure you're including all these elements in it, even in an abbreviated version, in your robocall scripts. Now, you're hosting an event. I want you to be planning on doing some stuff for security. It depends on the size of the event, but at least give a mind to it. things that you want, you can't, you may have invited the press, you may not have, to show up at your event, but people are going to be there with cell phones. So make sure that, you're controlling the background of where your speakers are talking. So, nobody can, one of my favorite things was, Romney was speaking and all behind him were Ron Paul signs. That was not a great visual for their team. Shame on them for not putting the backdrop behind Romney. But, if they're going to do it in an open field and they're going to be stupid, thank God for stupid enemies. So be sure that, you're wandering around and you're looking at your event to make sure that there's nothing in there that might embarrass you, and control the images that are going to be coming out of it as best you can. I wander around and I'm looking for people that are violent on both sides. Some of our guys that may be showing up with long guns, I may be saying, can you do me a favor, leave that there? Yes, you have a constitutional right, but it's intimidating and it just makes some of our folks nervous. Try to keep the anarchists out. Look out for opposition that want to disrupt your event. And they're out there, and there are those that, on the opposite side that want to try to discredit your stuff. Oh, really? I mean, who would do that? Well, sometimes these type of folks show up. They may or may not be really on your side. There's a lot of leftists that I've noticed show up at different events trying to put the stars and bars in places to show that, look, they're a bunch of nothing but a bunch of neo-Nazis. Why do I know this? Because I have showed up at liberal events carrying the communist flag, and they never gave me a rough time for it, but man, it made it, some cool Facebook posts, to see a bunch of, Hillary supporters with a communist flag flying in the background. It was kind of fun. And the enemy, George Soros and company have financed a lot of activity for the Democratic National Committee and some of their affiliates to actually disrupt Trump events with violent thugs. Those mobs that showed up against Trump and that are out protesting and wearing the clockabobs and all that other stuff. Not all of them are activists who have been mobilized. They're just paid thugs. They're paid anarchists. Surprisingly, a large number of them actually live with their moms. So, this is like extra dope money for some of them. So keep in mind, if you're big enough and you're attracting enough attention, the folks that may be showing up may not be on your side at all, but may be paid activists from your enemies. Make sure the event only has one way in. This is one of the things that, Tea Party rallies for some reason don't do enough of. You want to make sure that in order to get into the event, everybody's got to pass through a particular choke point. And the deal is, pretty simple. In order to get in, we want your name, your zip code, and your email address. That's your price of admission. We're not going to charge you money to get in, but, this is what we want. And it's an implied agreement that, we want it because we want to make sure that their time is well served. So design your event so that everybody has to go to that choke point, and it's a great place to screen out, agent provocateurs and other folks too. The best type of rooms are the ones with the expandable partitions, so that when people come in, if more people than you expected showed up, you can open up the doors and allow more people in. Slightly crowded is really okay. Matter of fact, slightly crowded is optimal because it increases the excitement of the event. What is bad is empty seats, and that's what you don't want. So in order to avoid empty seats, use the expandable room. And that's part of your design. So when people wander in and they see empty seats, the energy level goes down, and everybody thinks the event's a failure. What I want to create at an event, first of all, is, when people show up, the first few folks, get a PA system and play some music over it. Not deafeningly loud. It's the music because that allows people to have conversations without, but when they come into a cold room and there's only a handful of folks, everybody talks in low tones for a long period of time, and there's no excitement or energy to it. But if they have to talk over the music, there's people will interact more easily. Put some signage, supporting your cause, etc. Have things, to pass out to folks so that they know that they're at a rally. Deputize some hosts or hostesses to go wandering around. You're looking for the potential threats and the thugs. They're going to be wandering around making sure that there's no stars and bars or anything that might discredit what you're doing. And, answer any questions and help folks, find where the restrooms are and stuff like that. Recognize that certain crowds are going to have special needs. So if you're doing something that with a large number of handicapped folks, make sure, that you have facilities for them and, you know how to take care of them, et cetera. And, the ramps are all functioning, et cetera. And if, if you're inviting a bunch of homeschoolers, better have parking for multi-passenger vans and expect large numbers of kids to show up. A lot of homeschool families, if you don't have 9 kids, they really wonder, if you've had health problems or something like that. There are many large families. So keep that in mind. What do you tell people to wear at the event? And the answer to that is, it depends. I always suggest you wear, the most intimidating thing you can get away with. If you can get away with wearing a costume at all. There's a group that I used to work with in Iowa called ABATE, which is a group that was opposed to helmet laws. Some of the people that were members of that group were actual bikers, the Hells Angels types. A lot of them were accountants who liked to, ride their motorcycle without a helmet. I didn't care if they were an accountant. I didn't care if they were an attorney. When they showed up at the Capitol representing the ABATE, they wore leathers. I wanted to look like the Wild Bunch came running in because that is inherently intimidating. So best costume we can get. I was doing work for the American Academy of Ophthalmology on the scope of practice issue here in Oklahoma. I'm working with eye docs. And the eye docs wanted to show up at the Capitol. I said, great. I know how, guys, I want you all to dress. You all have to be wearing white lab coats or scrubs, but you all need a stethoscope around your neck. And they're all looking at me like I'm nuts. Like, we're eye docs. We don't have stethoscopes. And I said, borrow one. You got buddies that are doctors that you can get a stethoscope from. And they're like, why do we want that? I said, because every time somebody sees somebody walking in with scrubs or a lab coat and a stethoscope around their neck, the first thing you think of is, boy, last time I saw that was I was sitting on tissue paper and I'm wondering where they're going to touch me. It's intimidating. So utilize it. If you're doing a fight, where you've got sheriffs or police that might actually be on your side, keep in mind, these guys can legally lobby with firearms. They are by nature intimidating. So utilize everything you possibly can, to try to get into the minds of the legislators. You're not trying to win a popularity contest. You're not trying to all look like, Stepford housewives at these events. You're actually trying to intimidate legislators. And, the more folks you have and the best costume you've got, the better off you are, the more memorable you're going to be. Some thoughts on planning these events. Set up, plan your time and date around, what else is happening. Make sure that you're not conflicting with any other major groups events at that time. And look, at every Capitol, there's somebody over there that keeps track of all the different events. So try not to set up your rally at a time when it conflicts with others, and try to make sure that the major rooms are available. You may be able to get a room inside the Capitol that you can use kind of headquarters or something like that. I don't know. It depends on, your particular state. But, try to find that stuff out in advance.
the right to work people, when they passed right to work in Michigan, figured out that, certain amount of real estate around the Capitol was reservable in advance, and they knew that the right to work vote was going to happen. So they reserved it for their side and put up those big tents deliberately to minimize the number of Union thugs that could be surrounding the Capitol. And they could, the Union thugs didn't have any rooms inside the Capitol because our side had already reserved them. So try to reserve the rooms and, set up a time and date where, you're not going to be conflicting with other things. Set up the location of your rally if you want to be at the Capitol or stuff like that. Figure out if there's any necessary permits, that are going to be required. And the further out you can do that, the better. Nothing worse than saying, we're going to have a rally over at the South Lawn, only to find out that that's when they're seeding the South Lawn and, you can't have anybody over there. So try to coordinate that in advance. Train, realize that you're going to have to train people. It takes time to identify them, mobilize them, get them to make commitments, etc. So, you have to have a few weeks of, reaching out to folks. So, make your list of people that are going to show up and be part of this, and part of your leadership team. You need lists of, all these like-minded groups, of identified supporters, people that have done activist type work, etc. So you got the list of folks that you want to reach out to, and you got to plan your promotion. Use the MISE formula. Look at all the different marketing channels that you could potentially have. Set up your robocalls. Do your research on, what do we have to do in order to do a robocall, etc. All these type of things you can do ahead of time. And then put together a budget. Because look, do you want to serve food? Do you need permits? Do you have to do porta pods? Things like that. They may require money on some of these things. Do they? I don't know. You're going to have to ask. And you have to put together a budget. Plus, look, that printing stuff isn't necessarily free. So, in order to print up a whole bunch of flyers, etc., you may have to spend some money. Do you want to do a pitch for money as part of your overall event? And if so, who's going to be there to, collect it? Who's going to make sure that it's safeguarded? Who's going to make sure that the money is spent well? That it is going to not destroy your reputation because you guys blew a bunch of cash and used it for your own personal gain. That would be bad and unethical as heck. And that's stealing, as far as I'm concerned, from old ladies and widows and orphans, and that's bad. So, and if you're going to do a pitch for money, who's going to do it? And what type of script are they going to do? It's going to require some preparation. So those are some of the major elements of planning to think about when you're about ready to do an event. You've got to train some key people. You have to train the people that are going to be manning the sign-in desk. And how are they going to deal with people, particularly those libertarian anarchist types who say, well, I don't want to give you my email address. Why do I have to do this, etc. So, talk to them, find out what information you want to get, from people coming in and what to do with troublemakers. You want to train your hosts and hostesses, the folks that are going to be perusing the crowd to make sure everything's going well. Train your speakers. Know, what somebody is going to say before you give them a microphone. Look, every rally, you're going to have some speakers. Somebody's going to be talking. Make sure you know what they say beforehand. And, make sure they stay on script. That's important. Amazingly overlooked. Not that I'm bitter. And, look, you might want to spend some time training your mob. This can be done, ahead of time, where you talk about what you want them to wear, etc., and what you want them to do. Now, you want to have a rally where you're going to, they all come in, they all get informed about the issue, and then you encourage them to go meet with their individual legislator while they're there. So the, legislature sees the mob on the outside, and then they all come inside, and they all try to grab their legislator.
You're going to explain to them how to, contact their legislator while they're there. So, well, not mob, but, polite crowd. I mean, we just don't want pitchforks and stuff like that. We don't want property damage. That would be bad. The end result of all this work is, maybe some potential pain on legislators. They're going to be seeing a lot of visible evidence that there are large numbers of angry voters. So why are you doing it to them? Well, we're not doing it just because it's fun, which is a tacit admission that, yes, it is fun. But that's not the only reason. If we're doing this thing right, every step of the way, every bit of this battle is stuff that we're actually going to gain strength just by getting into the fight. You just don't lose political capital by spending it. You actually gain because you're building up bigger list and more members and creating more activists. And we're getting the correct response from the politicians. I mean, I want them to go to bed thinking about certain things. What's making all those Tea Party people mad? Are they mad enough to vote against me? How many of them are mad? What would it take to make them go away? And my friends, those are the type of questions that you want politicians to be going to bed thinking about, in my humble opinion. So, that brings us to the end of the presentation on how to get a well-behaved mob over to the Capitol, how to mobilize folks, and how to get them involved in your fight. And the nice thing about it is none of this stuff should be wasted. We've got a few minutes here to spend for any questions that folks might have. And there's a couple of ways that you can ask a question. One of them is, you can type in the little box down there in the chat box, and you can type in a question, and I will, try to answer it, as we go along. Or if you notice on the GoToWebinar box on the side, there's a little hand that kind of sticks up. If you have a microphone, if you've called in, as opposed to just listening on your speakers, but you actually called in to get the audio, if you raise the hands on there, I can unmute you. So either one works. So I'll give you guys a minute or so if you've got any questions about this presentation, to raise your hand and be glad to do it. Okay, Roger's got it. So Roger, you're unmuted.
Yes, I have a good example of what we ran into. We had a representative that wanted to protect businesses in Kansas against being sued for their religious beliefs and the Nazis from the LBT group. I mean, they put the guy's wife in a porno thing on Facebook, and I mean and were death threats and everything else. And it's frustrating to me because we were up there being polite Christians trying to make sense, and they respond to the people that threaten their wife and family.
Yeah.
And you know how to combat that. I went and thanked the representative for doing that, and his assistant ran down the hall after me and said, thank me, because he'd had so much people piling on from the LGBT group.
And I'm afraid for the next few years it's only going to get worse. I wish I could, tell you, that there's a magic bullet, but the best you can do is to at least give thought to the idea that, you're going to have enemies. And the leftists, right now, they're just not going to be happy unless they're throwing bricks, burning down the Starbucks, or hurting people. So, put that in as part of your planning matrix that you got to actually think about this stuff. And
we did have some effect. We had a rally at the courthouse, at the federal courthouse in Wichita this week. I don't know if you saw that on Facebook. But,
no, I missed that one.
Yeah, we had a crowd that they wanted to stand up on the steps outside the courthouse, and you might want to look up the Cox-Kettler case, but the judge had so many letters calling him an idiot, but most of them were polite, and he went below the sentencing guidelines and just gave him probation for now.
Oh, the guys that had the silencers?
Yes.
Yeah. Now that I didn't see the rally part, but was glad to see it. They're at least not doing prison time. And,
it's on
and
Facebook Live under Chris Ann Hall.
Okay. And the nice thing about doing it on federal property is you get federal marshals to show up, and they have a
we had a guy show up and tell us they couldn't stand up on the steps. They had to come down on the sidewalk because we were blocking the way, or might be blocking the way, and it was very good to get on video.
Yeah. So, no, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys stepping up for those folks, and hopefully Trump will pardon them and make this nonsense go away. And appreciate you being on the call too, Roger. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Man. Let's see. I joined late in some of it. Will the recording be sent by email? Yeah, actually it will. You'll be getting a copy of the slides. I sent and created the PDFs of them already. And this is the second one. I think this one actually went better than the first. So, this recording will actually be sent out to probably tomorrow afternoon. So by being on the call, you get a copy of it for your, of the slides and everything else. So, that'll be coming in the next day or so. Well, it's running late for the folks on the East Coast. It's after 10, and I've got to be up tomorrow morning at 5:30. So I'm going to probably be heading to bed here pretty soon too. So I want to thank you all very much for being part of the Foundation for Applied Conservative Leadership. I hope you'll join us. Be looking. There'll be more opportunities for more webinars down the road. And if you are interested in getting copies of any of our past webinars, etc., they are available for you. Send me an email, or reply to any of the foundation emails. There's always an opportunity to become a monthly donor to the organization. We just bought some new T-shirts and stuff that we're setting up as part of our monthly donor program. So if you'd like one of those, be looking for an opportunity to make a small monthly contribution of $10, $20 a month and help us do good by causing political pain. And I appreciate your time for being here. Thank you all very much for participating in making America a better place. You all have a great night. Thank you for being here.